After the death of Miranda Stevens, the Canary Button Company sat silent for nearly a decade. Orders continued to grow, and after a while the East Wing was actually reopened and retooled to create a vast selection of products, from cufflinks and charms to belt buckles. Throughout that time, a sense of normality fell over the plant and the history of the site, as well as its public persona, and it eventually faded into mere memories. But in the background, the darkness that dripped from every beam continued to grow. Workers came and went, doing their particular tasks and playing their particular roles. All the while, the darkness wrapped each of them in its grasp. Some would take notice, but most would simply move on about their lives, unaware of the fog that they found themselves in, until it was too late. Christopher Johnson, hired as an electrical maintenance technician for the plant, noticed something wrong very early on during his stay, and although he did his best to ignore the darkness that called to him at all hours, he too would fall under the control of it, emanating from the Canary Button Company. It would start innocently enough, with seeing shadows as he worked and moved about the production floors and the lesser-travelled areas of the plant. Figuring these were no doubt his eyes playing tricks on him, he would continue with his tasks and never let the movements in the far corner of his field of vision distract him from doing so. Weeks would pass, and every day he would get up, kiss his wife goodbye, and report for work at the Canary Button Company. After nearly a year of employment, after discussion with his wife and their family doctor, Christopher was put on a low dose of medication to treat symptoms of depression and a possible bipolar disorder, as well as sleeping pills to fight the sleepless nights he was experiencing. Citing stress at work and insomnia, a problem he had dealt with since he was a child, as the cause of strange behavior, at home the medication slowly built up in his body, and again in time, life moved with a familiar normality. One evening, standing in the hallway just outside his own door, Christopher stood with his forehead resting on the surface of the door before entering. His head was pounding, and a rhythmic pulse seemed to inflare every nerve in his body. He couldn't raise the strength to even lift his hands to turn the doorknob and enter the apartment. "Chris?" A voice softly called for him, and although he couldn't look away from the door and the peephole mockingly looking back at him, he could hear footsteps approaching from down the hallway. "Chris, honey, are you okay?" His wife, Clarissa, stands to the side of him and puts her hand on his shoulder, concerned. As she does so, a weight seems to be removed from his entire body at once. Christopher inhales deeply through his nose and exhales, leaning up from the door, and again under full control of his senses before replying. "Yeah, I'm okay." He rubs his head and pushes his hair out of his face before turning to her. "I guess it was just a rough day. I'm just so tired." Clarissa smiles and slips in beside him to unlock the door. "Well, come on in and shower. I'll get something for you to eat and we'll just call it a night. Remember, Dr. Stevens said even with the pills you'll still have trouble staying well rested if you don't try to get more rest on your own." The door opens and she ushers him inside. The hot shower made it feel as if he were being born again, and at its completion he felt alive and more awake than he had in days. Clarissa had made him dinner, potato soup with cheese and bacon, as well as freshly baked dinner rolls. They ate with little discussion, and when finished, she stood beside him and pulled his face to hers in a kiss. "Go get some sleep, my hard-working man." She smirked slightly and ran her hands through his hair before continuing. "I love you, but you do look like hell today." Chris nodded in agreement and did as he was told, but not before being reminded of taking the pills she had laid out on the table with his meal. Sleep wouldn't come for hours, and when it did, the alarm mocked him as it was time to get up again, kiss his wife and go to work. The routine would over time become harder and harder, and with news of his wife's surprise pregnancy and the birth of his daughter looming in the future, his entire life was about to change, but not in a way that he could have ever expected. A work ticket came in through the normal pathways to his desktop early one Tuesday morning, and awaited his arrival with several others gathered upon his desk. Tickets in hand, Christopher found himself changing out fuses on several pieces of equipment, replacing lights that had burnt out recently in various corners of the plant. Shortly after lunch that day, Christopher found his way into the offices that were in the old portion of the building, and while searching through them, each one with a numbered placard, he found his way to the office upon his last outstanding work ticket, Office 205. Christopher knocked on the door softly, and from within a soft voice calls for him to enter. The door opened with nothing more than a slight squeak, and as it gives way, Christopher finds himself face to face with a stunning brunette woman who stands to greet him. "Oh, hello." Mary Ridley, an inventory clerk, stands from her desk before continuing. "Are you the one who's going to fix the lights?" She motions upwards, drawing Christopher's attention to several lights that are not illuminated. "Yes, ma'am, I'm Christopher. You can call me Chris." He extends his hand and shakes hers gently. "They all burnt out?" He motions upwards to the lights in a questioning manner. Mary steps around her desk, approaching him with a smile, her white blouse and grey skirt wrapping her body softly as she approaches the switches to the side of the door. "No, I think the switches went bad or something. Maybe the fuses? I'm not sure. They all stopped working last Thursday all at once." Christopher nodded, and as he assures her that light switches do not have fuses, he also switches the switch on to off and then back on again. "I think you may be right though. Sure doesn't feel like this toggle is doing a whole lot in there." He moves it quickly again. "See how little resistance it offers up, unlike this one?" He switches the dead switch several times quickly, and then the working switch beside it, which clicks harshly as the lights above go off and the room is instantly dark, then lights come back on. "My guess is that the switch is broken inside. That's why it is moving so easily, but not really doing anything. Won't be a hard fix. I'll just have to go get some parts and I'll be back in a few minutes, if that's okay." Mary nods. "That's fine with me. I just can't wait to get more lights on. This paperwork is hard enough as it is." She pauses. "In the dark, it's even worse." Offering a small laugh, she smiles. Christopher can't help but stare back at her for a moment before smiling and exiting her office. In the maintenance area below the east wing, Christopher made his way into a large storage cage, well off of the beaten path of traffic within the plant, and dug through drawers and boxes of material until he had found the few things that he thought he would need to repair the switch. His head slowly developed a slight ache that seemed to radiate through his entire body, an almost mechanical pulse that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He rubbed his forehead and tried to get his mind back on his work, but he could think of little more than Mary's white blouse and grey skirt, the faint smell of perfume that lingered on in the air as she approached with her smile. His head swirls, and as it does, the shadows surrounding him all seem to move at once, and they do it in his immediate direction.